nothing but blue above. Everything's so clear to me, since my heart has taught me how to see. A little bird has taken flight, and the flowers are in bloom tonight. Everything's so clear to me, since my heart has taught me how to see. I'm looking into the face of love, and love's looking back at me. I'm seeing through new eyes how real happiness can be. How real happiness can be. Clouds dissolved into the sun, and there's nothing but blue above. Everything's so bright to me, since my heart has taught me how to see. I'm looking into the face of love, and love's looking back at me. And I'm seeing through new eyes how real happiness can be. How real happiness can be. How real happiness can be.
I recently purchased my first vacuum for two reasons. First, I was divorced 2 years ago. And for the first year, whenever I had vacuuming needs, I would drive over to what I previously referred to as my house and borrow what I used to call the vacuum. The problem with this system was that since one of my main objectives at that time was avoiding all contact with my former life partner, I wound up putting off my vacuuming duties for months at a time. The vacuum, it seemed, had become a metaphor for that last remaining connection between us. And after a full year of avoiding the ex-misses and therefore not vacuuming, I was ready to sever it. The second reason I needed a vacuum, I have a dog. A white, long-haired Japanese chin named Sushi, who sheds so aggressively that she constantly leaves a plume of white behind her, kind of like an Air Force jet doing a flyover at the Super Bowl. In fact, there was so much hair in my carpeting that people who had never been allergic to anything in their lives would come into my apartment and start sneezing. They'd rip off 3 sneezes and go, "Oh, stay back, man, I must be coming down with something." And of course, not wanting to bust my beloved pet, I would usually say, "Yeah, I heard there's something going around. Can I get you a vitamin C?" So, off I went to Macy's, coupons in hand, to purchase my first vacuum. I lucked out with Evan, the most informed, premium, elite, gold-level, professional customer service representative, or whatever it is they're calling salespeople at Macy's these days, a novice vacuum cleaner buyer could ever want. Evan listened sagely to my needs, pointed to the Hoover Wind Tunnel 3000, and told me I could not do better. Later that night, I decided to take my new appliance for a test drive, and was soon grooving along to that singular vacuuming music, the roaring buzz bass of the motor, the tinkling high notes as debris is pulled up out of the carpeting, clattering up the plastic tubing, the occasional solo as a paper clip or a dried out piece of rigatoni gets sucked out of the carpet. After only a few minutes, the receptacle that holds the dirt, the removable dust cup, was solidly packed with enough hair to construct an entire new dog. Not wanting to strain my new possession, I decided to empty the dust cup. I deftly removed it from the main unit, held it over my kitchen garbage can by its ergonomically designed handle, and pressed the conveniently marked release lever. The bottom of the dust cup swung open violently, as spewing months of dirt and dog hair all over my kitchen floor. Chastising myself for this rookie move, I slammed the dust cup closed once again and hustled down the hall to the trash room on my apartment floor. I opened the rubbish chute, hit the release lever once again, and started shaking out the remaining debris from my removable dust cup. Too quick for me to stop it, the dust cup suddenly slid free from the handle and went hurtling down the chute, banging and clanging and ricocheting against the walls, and then landing with a horrific crash 4 stories below. At that point, I did what any self-respecting man would do. I blamed my ex-wife. And my reasoning was sound. After all, if she had thrown me a bone of affection over the last 10 years, uttered one sentence that wasn't a complaint or criticism, then I wouldn't have had to move out. My carpeting would not have been the Museum of Dog Hair. I wouldn't have needed a Wind Tunnel 3000, and I certainly would not have just dumped its brand new, used exactly one time, and now probably broken into 1,000 pieces, removable dust cup down the trash chute. Bitch! Satisfying as this was, I still had a dust cup to save. I bolted down the stairs to the basement, hoping I could get into the garbage room. A hope I never imagined I would ever have before. The garbage room consisted of 2 giant steel bins, each about 6 feet tall. One, positioned under the recyclables, was a traditional dumpster. The other was an enormous trash compactor, plastered with signs reading, "Do not play in, on, or near this compactor," and ominously, "Danger, this compactor starts automatically." It didn't matter. I was on a mission. I climbed up onto the compactor and gazed inside. There, miraculously, lying on a bed of white plastic bags of other people's garbage, was my removable dust cup, looking not so much like anything like a mint on a hotel pillow. I thought about jumping into the compactor to retrieve it, but remembering that it starts automatically, and not wanting to end my life scrunched into a little cube recognizable only by my eyebrows, decided that would be my last resort. I poked around the garbage room for some sort of tool I could use to scoop the dust cup out of the trash compactor. I found a plank of wood, climbed back up onto the compactor, positioned the plank inside the dust cup, and like a fisherman setting the hook on a tuna, lifted it out. I could not have been happier if I had saved a baby from a well. I examined the dust cup and saw that not only wasn't it cracked, it looked as good as new. I congratulated myself for purchasing such a sturdy item, and then I noticed that the small but essential release lever was missing. Oh. Resisting the knee-jerk, or perhaps just jerk, impulse to blame my ex-wife again, I leaped back onto the compactor and spotted my release lever cowering in the corner, practically whimpering, "I thought you forgot about me." I grabbed my trusty plank once again, and after a while, I managed to kind of scoot it under the release lever. The angle, however, was steep, so I had to pin the plank against the side of the compactor and sort of scrape it up slowly, balancing the release lever on top. This was actually working until I encountered an interior ridge on the wall of the compound, blocking me from lifting it any higher. When I tried to go around the ridge, the release lever would slip off and go back to the bottom. After a dozen unsuccessful attempts, I seriously considered lowering myself into the compactor. That business about starting automatically was most likely a bluff. But what if I couldn't get back up? I'd be stuck there all night. Even worse, what if one of my neighbors couldn't sleep and at 3 a.m. decided to empty her cat box and pour the contents directly down the rubbish chute? I'd be found in the morning, my hair matted with piss-stinky litter, cat turds on my shoulders like epaulets, muttering like a madman, "This is all her fault, this is all her fault." This last image pretty much eliminated any thoughts of getting into the compactor. I retrieved the plank once again and decided to give it one more try when I noticed that a layer of garbage goo, or trash custard, grime slime, refuse juice, whatever you call it, do not get it on you, had built up on the wood from scraping it along the inside of the compactor. A thought occurred to me. Maybe I could use this waste paste to stick the release lever onto the board. Back up onto the compactor I went, slammed the plank goo side down onto the release lever. It stuck, and I lifted it triumphantly to safety. Back in my apartment, I scrubbed the release lever clean and snapped it onto the dust cup. Despite the fact that I had spent the last hour breathing in the putrid fumes of 200 apartments worth of garbage, I could not believe my good luck. It was then I noticed that the glob of rubbish sludge had fallen off the end of the plank and was smeared across my shirt and down the inside of my naked arm. Feeling like that kid in Schindler's List who hides in the outhouse toilet, I dove into the shower, cranked the water up to scalding, and remained there until I thought I heard Jerry Brown himself banging on the door, ordering me to shut it off. Since that night, I have become a skilled and frequent emptier of my removable dust cup, as well as an expert vacuumer. Tiny shards of popcorn are no longer safe in my carpet. More significantly, I've also stopped blaming my prior spouse when things go wrong, and can even, although rarely, fondly recall some of the better moments of our marriage. Life moves forward, one wind tunnel at a time.
Jewish deli during the Depression. Reveling in the ethnic stews of New Haven, he'd trade his grandma's schmaltz for lasagna from the Italians, beef borscht from the Ukrainians, and head cheese from the Czechs. Amidst the riches that the New World offered, these new Americans liked to share their peasant cuisines, the comfort foods of their old countries. On weekends, I'd help Daddy chop onions for potato pierogi, garlic for marinara tomato soup. On Sundays, our centerpiece was some big bird eaten with our hands, despite the fats and the gravies. We quibbled over the giblets, tugged teensy eggs from the kosher chicken, and sucked our sections of the turkey neck audibly. We'd all gorge ourselves and complain about indigestion as my dog fought for scraps of whatever slim peckins hit the floor. And at the finest of eateries, I have often felt homesick for these messy, crazy meals. Then, a nice Jewish doctor who awakened my mind and tickled my humors on our first dates, made my mouth water when he invited me to his new place for a beef rib and Greek salad supper. I dressed up nice. As soon as I came in the door, he started seducing my salivary glands and a few others. He was showing off a slab of meat wearing nothing but garlic and kosher salt. He made butter melt around some smashed potatoes and shallots and crumbled feta over an undressed salad. And a circle of crudités then got laid on my plate. Oh, this foodie knew how to woo me. Can I help? I asked with faked inflection. I don't want you to do a thing, he said. He sat me down in the dinette and he said, you just relax. I love that. A PhD who does it all. How lucky can a middle-aged, never-married woman in her fresh manicure get? He slammed that meat onto a cookie sheet, shoved it into the stove, and tossed his anchovy herb melange into the salad. I was lucky that those aromas masked my pheromones. I was falling for him. Much too fast. My heart already felt touched, tenderized, and braised. This man had some of my father's best qualities. Nurturing, inventive, generous with portions, and skimpy with pretensions. Noshing on finger foods with so much to tell each other, we hardly noticed that the room was getting hot. I thought it was just me. Until the smoke detector went off. He threw open the apartment door, grabbed a towel, and fanned the thing until it faded. And then he peeked at the meat and he said, just a little longer. Let's have salad. Shoving greens into my mouth, slobbering oil all over my chin, I gave up trying to be dainty. Next time I would bring a tarpaulin, I decided, to protect myself. I noticed that none of his cloth napkins, flatware, or plates matched. Neither did mine. We'd pool our dishes and get new sets when we wed, I said to myself, and I slapped my mind silly. So, what's your favorite meal that you like to eat alone, he asked me. I had promised myself that I would tell the truth no matter what. After all, this guy was a shrink and he could probably read a cover up a table away. I like to disembowel an entire chicken, skin and all, with my hands, I said. Bite the ends off the bones and suck the marrow right out of them. Eating roasted fowl was a Sunday tradition in my family. Ours too, he cried. Delighted with our earthy common ground, like human garbage compactors, we continued gnashing our rough trade greens until the smoke alarm went off again. When fanning the alarm with the latest issue of Psychology Today failed, he climbed on a chair, dismantled or possibly broke it with a fork. Jewish men don't usually fix things, but they will pay people to do so, I comforted myself. He peeked at the ribs again. Maybe because they're so thick, he said. A little longer. Rice? Music? Both, I said, as he put an oldie station on and stirred a box of rice into boiling water. I mused to myself that we would have rice and music at our wedding. But then the odd smell and the smoke coming out of the kitchenette transformed my fantasy from romantic to fearful and my secretions from oxytocin to adrenocortical. The zombie alarm, dangling in midair, again alerted us, as did smoke gets in your eyes by the platters. Let me help, I suggested, without the upturned lilt. Okay, he said. I ran into the kitchenette, I opened the oven, and discovered it was lit only by an oven light, not a flame. I removed the raw ribs on the cookie sheet, opened the broiler door below, and revealed the prior tenant's dirty broiler pan scorching antique grease beneath the roaring flame. Yikes, he said. Oops, I didn't know there was a separate broiler down there. Within 30 minutes, the room was aired, the ribs succulent, the rice-a-roni onto which he grated white truffles, plus a good laugh, made for a cozy familial meal. I praised him to the skies, and I watched him clean up, noticing that he did not wash the undersides of the dishes. Clearly, this man needed me. So my Pygmalion complex awakened. I knew I'd be pitching in when we married. And so I did, when so we did. So life is nice and cooking is central, me on the weeknights, him on the weekends. Heeding the ancestors' urge to indulge on Sundays, on Saturdays my husband's psyche heeds the call of the hunter-gatherer. He roams wide and wild to capture us something truly throwback. Atavistic instincts drive him to find the unwanted bits that the butchers scorn. They may pay him to take them away. He has an especially soft spot for entrails. Things that would have simply been read by seers in the Middle Ages and then thrown to the wild dogs. Most not allowed by the Board of Health past the disposal cans of the slaughterhouse or the rabbi. Mr. Delicious adores goat kidneys and garlic, beef hearts and bacon, oxtails and leeks, chopped chicken livers and onions and schmaltz. Sharing my daddy's poor man food values, Mr. Delicious believes in using every inch of everything, including all surfaces of the kitchen and every tool, the bounties of our wedding day. Our shiny new silverware remains underused as our forks are our fingers. Far be it from this feminist to discourage his taking charge, his felling, skinning, boning, and flaming our meal. I know where my bagel is buttered. I see the best parts of my father in the worst of these offerings. Like him, like my dad, my mate expresses his love in food. But encouraging him, I may have made a monster out of him. Having tracked the small offbeat carcass, the squash, the quail, the crow, the cricket. He'll brown it in an iron skillet with butter, panko, pepper, onions, and garlic, scorching it onto all surfaces of the stove. I'll scrape these unidentified frying objects off onto brown paper plates to blot the oil. He always makes it smell like a home in our house, even with the double-barreled ventilator in cyclone mode. Obliterating quail and Cornish game hens, breaking the bones through with lips smacking alacrity, we roar like lions. Horror movie sounds emanate from mouths that will kiss sweetly goodnight after breaking every little wishbone with our dueling lips. We share a fervent wish for lower cholesterol. But when he ripens tripe in tomato sauce for hours, stews offal, or melts Stilton cheese on his version of a pizza on pita, I lose my appetite. He dines alone on those nights as I seal myself off past doors, air filters, and masks. I put police tape around the kitchen. I cordon off that wing with ropes. But lest you fear that he is isolated in his late-night eating orgies, rest assured that he is bonding with Battalion, Bourdain, and Bobby Flay via his laptop. Their scavenging adventures and eating justify his own. The morning after, as I throw open the doors to air out the area, the neighbors wave from a distance and say, "Ah, no wonder the Doberman was shredding the door all night. Your husband's been cooking again." I accept it all. Slip sliding in spills, trudging through salt and herbs, the depth of beach sand on the floors. I hose down the walls in wonderment at how big a mess one man can make for one man. And at how much I must like him to let him express himself so freely. My daddy would have loved this guy.
Over time and bones that remain. Ha 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 ha. Kali, Kali in my arms. Kali, Kali in my arms. The world is an egg she breaks to eat, and the world.
Before the internet, before sexting, before Tinder, before Grindr, before gay was okay, there were two sisters. I'm straight. I'm gay. In 1970, we both marched with Gloria Steinem with tens of thousands of people down Fifth Avenue, New York, in the first historic Women's Lib March.
I brought my 9-year-old son to the march. He wanted to wear his Boy Scout uniform and asked me to sew on his merit badges. I'm not sewing anything on a Hitler Youth uniform. Staple them on yourself. Oh no, a 9-year-old boy could learn to sew as good as Betsy Ross. My lesbo sister, as I fondly call her, and I have always been best friends and co-conspirators. We even shared a male lover in our 20s.
Yeah, and you didn't have to share that with your husband, so he'd hate me for the next 20 years of your marriage. My therapist once told me I was his most sexually liberated patient ever. Well, given my history, that's pretty easy. First, you just need to be molested by both your father and your mother. And second, by age 9, you've memorized all of your father's extensive porn collection.
I hope our father is roasting on a spit next to Hitler. These days, everyone seems to have had a happy childhood. Why else would people want to be led on a leash, whipped, and having their ass plugged? I find it so exciting.
I'm here to tell you, S&M isn't all it's cracked up to be. As kids, our parents tortured us with belts, ropes, fists, and knives.
Stupid fucks.
For me, an evening with Julie Andrews and the Sound of Music is downright orgasmic.
I hope our father is still roasting on a spit next to Hitler. After 15 years of marriage, I opened my husband's car trunk and found dozens of S&M magazines with photos of men in studded collars on leashes, yanked by dominatrixes, and whips. I told him, "You don't have to buy this shit. I'd be more than happy to do exactly what you want." "No," he said, "I'm afraid you'll really hurt me." For once, he was right. When I met my future ex-husband in my senior year of high school, he judged people who like sex as perverts, totally forgetting his own fetish, horses. Giddy up. He wanted me to go with him to riding stables to watch women on horses. And then in the car, he wanted me to jerk him off. Fuck no. I'm not doing that. I don't even know how I got here.
She never knows to this day how she gets
During sex, he insisted I tell him the same story about a woman riding bareback with petulant breasts, a sweaty ass, bouncing up and down, up and down. It disgusted me to be trapped in his loop. The only time I ever had anonymous sex was with my husband. It was called marriage.
My sister definitely had the starring role in Diary of a Mad Housewife. She was going nuts. But as her husband got richer, she morphed into the Harriet Tubman of suburbia. She actually gave thousands of his dollars to abused women to retain divorce lawyers and buy their freedom.
husband doesn't know how generous he is.
He also never knew he was a flaming feminist and a male chauvinist pig.
Well, my husband did have 9 inches, but he never knew what to do with it. He never initiated sex. His balls hung down to his knees. Years later, Nick Nolte had a scrotumectomy to elevate his balls. I knew exactly what that meant. Nick got tired of his balls hitting the water in the toilet. And I got tired of my husband's balls slapping me in the face and suffocating me. Decades before the Kardashians, my husband insisted I get ass pads, not in size A, B, C, but a D. I said, no way. You're the horse's ass, not me. Let me out of here.
Well, I've always had a big, fat ass. Go know at this age I'd be in style. There is a God. I knew at 5 that I was a lesbian, but I wanted to experience everything. Men was strictly recreational, sort of like playing with the Barbie dolls I never had. In those days, men had the money. I got addicted to European weekends, New York City restaurants, and the romantic rituals of heterosexual courtship. One of my greatest male lovers was a real estate millionaire. He rented out Radio City Music Hall for his 40th birthday party. That night, he proposed to me, but I couldn't go on with a charade. I blurted out, I can't marry you, I've got a secret, I'm a lesbian. He looked shocked. I like that. And then he said, sweetie, you should be arrested for false advertising. Years later, he was arrested by the FBI for being an international drug dealer. It was lucky I was a lesbian. I dodged a real bullet.
My husband of 25 years never called me sweetie. He never complimented me. He never held my hand, and he always took credit for my ideas. He laughed and repeated my one-liners as if they were his. He laughed that phony fuck salesman laugh. But I got the last laugh. I fucked one of my husband's colleagues, a milk-fed Iowa gorgeous boy. For the first time, I really felt loved. I was his fantasy Bette Midler. I also was the only other Jewish person he ever laid eyes on. When we had sex, he'd whisper in my ear, you are the wind beneath my wings. I like that. Yes, I was his forbidden fruit. A Jewish Jezebel to his fundamentalist Christian. After we broke up, he felt so guilty, he went to church every day for 6 months, crying and begging for forgiveness. Truthfully, I loved that he really cared that much.
What a Midwest pussy. My all-time favorite lover was an Alabama beauty queen. She got the throne for having a cat named Sappho and a published photo of her making out in a lesbian bar. Her father was a Southern Baptist preacher who told her the KKK was just like the Rotary Club. She loved talking dirty during sex, pretending we were making it in the front pew of her father's church. She didn't give a shit about sexual taboos. For her, they were all gone with the wind.
7 years after my divorce, I found me a boy toy. I was way ahead of Madonna. He was gorgeous, 6'4", black hair, blue eyes, and Irish. And he was also the same age as my youngest son, 24. I loved when he swooped me up in his arms, called me darling, and carried me up the stairs just like Rick Butler. I creamed. It's true. In fact, sometimes we did use whipped cream. I was his hot fudge sundae.
He was so young, I didn't know whether to hug him or burp him.
I don't care what you think, ever.
So what else is new?
At that time, he was perfect for me. We played like two teenagers. We had a game called Supermarket Fantasy. In the grocery produce aisle, I'd make a grab for his ripe banana. In the meat department, he'd slip his hand down my pants and grab my juicy steak. I yearned for risky sex all during my marriage. Finally, I did something that was at least a misdemeanor.
My sister's sex life was a lot more PG than mine. I was inspired by the Women's March and I enrolled at 26 in a criminal justice college. My classmates were mostly gun-carrying, active New York City cops. I had a handsome philosophy professor who was an ex-Jesuit priest. We had sex on the altar of his ex-church seminary. He cried tears of joy. I couldn't tell if he was fucking me or fucking the Catholic Church. Also in college, I had an Irish Catholic girlfriend who pretended I was Sister Mary Agnes as we had sex in front of the other nuns at her convent high school. Jesus, did any of these people notice I was Jewish? In college, I slept with an undercover cop. He was traditional and Italian. We often sparred in speech class about women's lib. Here was a real macho guy who infiltrated the mafia and risked his life every day. Yet in bed, he was often scared limpless of me, a simple woman who knew exactly what she wanted.
Actually, I thought my sister was a major sleaze bucket,
I knew that.
but I never told you.
You didn't have to.
She took me to see gay male porn in San Francisco, telling me the music was really great. Can you believe we had to go to a gay male theater just to see it because the internet wasn't invented yet? I thought the sex was so mechanical.
Nowadays, people use strap-ons or sex toys. In the good old days, feelings and fingers ruled. This lesbian never used a dildo. No dildo has the velvety texture or the unpredictability of a well-endowed penis. When I told my therapist about my odd obsession with gay guy porn, he looked puzzled. Not many lesbians were in therapy 40 years ago confessing to this addiction. He finally asked, are you a top or a bottom? This lesbian watching gay porn phenomenon was finally explained to me by Annette Bening when she played a lesbian. It's because a penis is more visual than a vagina. On Andy Cohen's Bravo show, he always asks women if they've ever taken a dip in the lady pond. Andy brags that he's a gold star gay. He's never ever had sex with a woman. Well, this lesbian went scuba diving in the male pond. I deserve an Oscar.
conclude from all this there is absolutely nothing new under the sun. The art of sexual bullshitting was born when Adam first slept with Eve.
To myself on rare occasion, 'cause I'm so very shy. Since the beloved took his seat in your eye. Woo.
During the summer before college, I had to send a yearbook picture, along with my two main interests, to this thing called the Freshman Record. This was a time before Facebook, and the Freshman Record was a real book that introduced you to your classmates and showed how beautiful and fascinating you were. I thought that it'd be hilarious to send a picture of myself wearing a red, green, and yellow Rasta hat, along with my two main interests, publications and comedy. I figured that my fellow freshmen at the University of Michigan would love my carefree attitude. And of course, the ladies it would get. He loves comedy and publication? Sign me up! Who would not want to hook up with that guy? Answer: everyone would not. And because of that poor choice, I spent most of my freshman year like that Rasta hat, lonely in my dorm room, collecting dust and listening to They Might Be Giants. We've all made mistakes in our lives, some big, some small. I love talking about my mistakes. I think owning up to your mistakes is character building and shows personal growth. It also gets the conversation going at awkward work lunches. The current administration seems to pride itself on not admitting their mistakes, as if to do so would show weakness. Furthermore, when the press reports on their shortcomings, they call the media liars and purveyors of fake news. It's an evil plot to turn us into mindless drones who can't tell fact from fiction, and I'm sure it's working on some people, but in an effort to combat this trend, I'm going to openly roll through some of my favorite mistakes right now. These errors in judgment are massive, earth-shattering moments like those put forth like the regime currently at the helm. But to me, they're monumental. So let's begin. I once told a casting director that I could cry on cue. Oh yeah, I said, no problem. However, I could not cry on cue. This became a problem when that casting director hired me to play smarmy pharmaceutical rep on Lifetime's memorable hospital drama, Strong Medicine. Up until that point, I thought acting was just saying your line when the other person stopped talking. So when it came time for my character to mourn his baby, who he accidentally left to die in a sweltering car, my acting limits had been reached. As I stood on the ICU set with my fake, lifeless baby doll, I couldn't muster up a single tear. and after many, many tear-free takes, the director cleared the room. He leaned over, put his arm around me, and said, "Think of something sad." I did. My acting career. Then they gave me Visine. That was a dumb mistake. But at least I didn't ban Muslims for entering the United States because of their religion. Here's another one. When I moved to Los Angeles, I met a nice woman. And we went on 2 marathon dates. In hour 7 of our second date, I asked this nice woman if she had plans for Yom Kippur. She didn't. And I offhandedly said that I was going back to Chicago. She should meet me there. I didn't think she would. Who flies 2,000 miles to think about everyone you wronged all year while not eating? That's not a fun third date. But guess what? She said she'd come. Yom Kippur approaches, I go to Chicago, but the day before she arrived, I reconnected with a woman who I had the biggest crush on. And me and my crush made out in the rain. That's a significant makeup. My crush had never seen the Rasta hat picture, and I was still attracted to her. Then the next day, when the nice woman who I originally invited arrived, I ascribed my standoffishness to Yom Kippur. And I awkwardly told the nice woman this story several days later at an Islands in Los Angeles, and she was not happy. That wasn't cool of me. But it wasn't as not cool as making up massacres that never happened. I made my grandma cry once. I was 17, I was visiting my grandparents in Florida, and my grandmother said she wanted to go to a flea market, and I told her that sounded really boring. She nodded her head softly, went in her room, and sobbed. I felt horrible, apologized to her. I don't like making anyone cry, especially my 70-year-old grandma. We went to the flea market, which, in my defense, was very boring. I shouldn't have said that. Much like the president shouldn't have said, judges who disagree with him should be blamed for causing problems. I have more favorite mistakes. My wife and I used to live on the bottom floor of a duplex. Above our bedroom slept the owner of the duplex. And every few months she'd come home really late with her heavily footed boyfriend and have impossibly loud sex and then watch Law and Order. After a few times of enduring the sex Law and Order combo, I grabbed a broom and pounded on the ceiling. That stopped the 3 a.m. orgasm of the duplex owner. Now, I know this was dumb on many fronts, and she let me know in the morning in an equally loud way. In high school, I used to drive to a terrible part of Chicago called the Jungle to buy weed from a Jamaican guy named Redbeard. I could have easily gotten shot or robbed, but no, we had to get the weed so we could go smoke and listen to another bootleg by the Grateful Dead who I hated, not worth it. You guys, I didn't listen to Hamilton until 2 weeks ago. Big mistake.
Yeah.
In second grade, I watched my best friend Justin shit his pants and said nothing in his defense. I could have given a Spartacus-like speech and rallied everyone behind him. Instead, I sat silently as the brown puddle grew in his seat. On further reflection, I was only 7 years old, and he did shit in his pants. I'm going to give myself a pass on that. But I will not give myself a pass on the fact that for one season, I wrote on a racist ventriloquist TV show. I'd never seen this man's act, but they wanted me because my mother is a puppeteer. They also thought that I could bring a more liberal perspective to the writer's room, which proved sort of true, and the product ended up being just slightly racist instead of totally racist. The racist ventriloquist actually had a very strict formula in terms of dick jokes to racist jokes. One time we entered his beautiful home to watch a recently cut promo for the show. He hated it. He paced around his $1 million kitchen and screamed, "You guys, how many times do I have to tell you? This promo is 20% racist jokes and 80% balls jokes. I need 50% racist and 50% balls. Even eat racist balls." And while I didn't write any of the racist jokes, I sure stood backstage as he told them. Speaking of racism, 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Mr. President, you might want to mention that next time Holocaust Remembrance Day rolls around. I don't expect the current administration to own up to their mistakes, but we can't learn from our bad choices if we can't accept that we made them. Humility is part of what makes us human. Although it is possible that these guys aren't human. They might be robots. And robots don't admit anything. And this makes so much more sense now. We're fucked.
Standing on the hillside, watching the rain. Rolling hill, the shape of a cloud. They say the American dream is your kids doing better than you did, but fuck that. My mom's life was way harder than mine, but that just makes her stories more exciting. Even her abortion story is better. And my grandmother, whose life was so hard she went to a mental institution for shock treatment 11 times, her stories are so good that she claimed, I'm doing my grandmother now, I was an abortion that didn't take. So when I showed up, oh boy, were they surprised. How does that even happen? Was my great-grandmother so fat she couldn't even tell she was still pregnant? In more ways than one, I guess I'm lucky to be alive to have any stories to tell. According to my mom, for the first year and a half of her marriage, my dad faked his orgasms. I asked her how, and she said, I don't know what he did up there, but he put on quite a show. See, even that story's better than mine. My ex-husband couldn't get hard enough to fake his orgasms. Oh, come on. I don't know why my dad pretended to ejaculate, and obviously I can't ask because that would mean calling and talking to him. Nevertheless, my mom persisted, and oh boy, here I am. As my mom put it, I knew I wanted to leave your father, but I didn't want to go alone, so I had you. A year and a half later, she plotted her escape from my dad by fucking a handsome African-American gentleman she'd met in group therapy. He helped her get an apartment and a job. She left my dad, and she and I moved into a tiny one-bedroom tenement-style apartment in Little Italy, where we had the honor of being the only Jews. Those were heady days for me and my mom. We were doing it, pursuing our dreams of her being a famous actress. The only thing we had going against us was everything. My mom's birth control of choice was the diaphragm. I know this because we lived in a one-bedroom. She slept on the couch in the living room, and sometimes she'd leave her diaphragm out to get air, I suppose. For you young people, a diaphragm looks like a little plastic yarmulke. Perfect to put on a teddy bear if you want to pretend it's wearing an oddly scented beret. Which I did. The diaphragm is not known for its convenience. And being 86% effective, neither is the diaphragm known for its effectiveness. At some point, my mom met my stepdad. Her joke about this time in her life, my mom is the kind of person who has jokes about times in her life, is that she slept with every guy in her acting class until she got to my stepfather. So my mom got pregnant, again, with her scene partner's baby. What to do, what to do? Get an illegal abortion, that's what to do. My stepfather was 24 years old, a struggling actor, earning a living waiting table at a restaurant in Brooklyn called Pips. My stepfather, like a gentleman, found a solution for my mom. Rita, the short order cook at Pips, who was also a nurse and a midget. Or, as my stepfather says, a perfect midget. Abortion is a hot topic. Sorry. Anti-choice people believe that all life is sacred, to which I say, really? Personally, I don't see what's so great about life in the first place. It's scary and you're going to die, which kind of takes some of the fun out of it for me. Like if every movie you went to, you knew ahead of time all the characters would die either violently, through awful diseases, or just via getting so old that shitting becomes a triumph, would you be excited to go to the movies? The point is, I'm pro-choice, even though I wouldn't exist if my great-grandmother's abortion had been successful. Irony. Anyway, it's 1967-ish. Abortion is illegal. My mom's working as a receptionist for her shrink, and my stepdad's a waiter. Just so we know what we're talking about, getting an illegal abortion is no walk in the park. Getting a legal one isn't a walk in the park either. For the record, a walk in the park's not that great. The best part about my legal abortion was the Valium drip. The part where they put a vacuum cleaner up my pooch while my ex-boyfriend cried because he wanted the baby and had to want whatever the opposite of what I wanted was, sucked. But I was in the middle of a nervous breakdown at the time, and I still had SAG insurance, so at least my abortion was fully covered. Thank you, Hollywood. Again, back to my mom's much more exciting back alley. The most publicized way of inducing abortion is the coat hanger method, which I don't understand. Is it really that difficult to get other wire-shaped things? Like you're in such a rush, the only wire object you can possibly get your hands on is the coat hanger. If you're that unprepared, my bet is you don't have extra wire hangers around anyway, so do you have to bend your abortion hanger back into shape and reuse it? So my mom didn't get the coat hanger abortion. Rita, the short order cook nurse/perfect midget gave my mom a Fells Naphtha douche. This was so common back then, my mom describes it as Fells Naphtha, with a wink and a cackle, like, we don't know what the fuck she's talking about. Well, I didn't, so I looked it up. According to Wikipedia, Fells Naphtha is not some Swedish music video director you pretend to know. It's a soap created in the 1800s in Baltimore by Lazarus Fells. It comes in a bar like a body soap, but it's most effective as a pre-treatment for removing difficult stains, i.e. chocolate, persimmon, and, I guess in a pinch, fetal cells. Oh. As you might have guessed, getting a back alley soap douche abortion by a short order cook who also happens to be a midget, however perfect, is not a pleasant experience for my mother. Neither was being a single mom in her 20s raising a toddler on next to no child support because her ex-husband, aka my dad, aka the ejaculator faker, wanted to punish her for not loving him. She couldn't call her mom for help because my grandmother would only scream at her through the phone for selfishly having dreams. My mom had nowhere to turn, no Planned Parenthood, no now. In her family, when you had nowhere to turn, you had a nervous breakdown and went to a mental institution. So my mom called her brother, my Uncle Herbie, and his wife, my Aunt Irene, the perfect Aunt Irene, to come get her so my mom could be admitted. On day 4, my mom struck up a conversation with a lovely woman. They agreed the mental hospital wasn't for them. Maybe they weren't really crazy after all, and I mean, they had important things to do with their lives. After all, the woman said, I'm the president. Back then, a woman saying she was president sounded really crazy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a good abortion story. An exciting abortion story, much more dramatic than mine. And I guess with the world the way it is right now, I hope and pray that my daughter's abortion story, should it ever occur, will be even more boring than mine. Because they still make Fells Naphtha.
Pieces of me, pieces of you. I think I'm seeing fragments, and all these shards are in my hands, assembling the meaning. Pieces of me and pieces of you, two together we would be dissolved in a day. When nothing's true, it's all a part of you. Pieces of me and you. And everything I wanted to see. Pieces of me, pieces of you. The hole in my heart is plain out of view. Just parts we assume are me and you. We grasp and try, expecting to find there's something behind these pieces. Added up to me and you, together we're seeing through these pieces. Pieces of me and of you.